Welcome back to our module on percent and proportional relationships. This is lesson 3, and it is called Dividing with Common Denominators. Our goal for today we are going to review dividing with common denominators. The question that I want you to be thinking about during this lesson is, why can we divide straight across when we have a common denominator? All right, so in the things to know section, the denominator is the bottom number of a fraction. Okay, and it's very important that you remember that, because the denominator when working with division is really important. A common denominator means that the bottom number of both fractions are the same. So an example of this right here is we have the fraction 2/3 and we have the fraction 5/2. And if you're looking at those two fractions, you will notice that they right now do not have a common denominator. This one has thirds as the denominator, and this one has halves as the denominator. And so what we have to do is we have to find one that 3 goes into and 2 goes into evenly, and we have to make that our new denominator. All right? So a way to do that is find a number that both denominators go into evenly. So one way that I like to do this is I like to think to myself, what number goes into 3, and what number does 3 go into evenly, and what number does 2 go into evenly. And so if we list out the multiples, we know that 3 times 1 is 3, we know 3 times 2 is 6, we know 3 times 3 is 9, we know 3 times 4 is 12, and we could go on for a little while, but we're not necessarily needing to, because we just need to find one that they share. So 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8, and already, if you have taken it that far, you will notice right here that we found a number that they both share, and that number that they both share right there happens to be 6. And so that, for me, is going to be the common denominator. So what I do then is I write off to the side equals blank, and that blank is actually a fraction bar. And what I'm doing is I'm going to put 6 as the denominator, because that's what both of them go into evenly. And now this is the part that makes it very simple. You just have to remember the multiplicative properties. And so you say to yourself, how did 3 get to 6? Well, I multiplied it by 2. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So 2 times 2 is 4. So I would write that right there. And now I ask myself this question, how did I get from 2 to 6? And I say, okay, I multiplied it by 3. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 times 5 is 15. And now I have these two fractions, which is what they were. These two fractions have now been turned into equivalent fractions with the denominator of 6. And so we have equivalent fractions with the denominator of 6. And now, since we have them have the same denominator, now we can actually do something with them, which is kind of nice. Okay, so now what I would like you to do is I would like you to work with me, and we're going to figure out what a common denominator for these two fractions would be. We're going to figure out what a common denominator would be for these two fractions, and we're going to figure out what a common denominator would be for these two fractions. So 3 sets of fractions that I would like to find the common denominator. Okay, so first things first, like we did up above, we are going to find out what 3 and 4 have in common. And so I'm going to write 3 up here, 4 underneath it. 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12. We'll stop there for a minute and see if we find one. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12, and look right there, we found it. 4 times 4 is 16. So now I have the common denominator that I was looking for, and in this problem, it happens to be 12. Okay, so what we are going to do, like we did in the other problem, is we're going to put equals fraction bar, and then we are going to put equals fraction bar. And now we have to ask ourselves how we would get from 3 to 12, because remember, our new common denominator is going to be 12. So we ask ourselves, how do we get from 3 to 12? We multiplied by 4. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 2 times 4 is 8. Now we have to ask ourselves, how did we get from 4 to 12? Well, we times it by 3. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 1 times 3 is 3. And now we have, just like we did before, equivalent fractions that have the same denominator. So we went from this denominator to 12, from 4 to 12, and now they have something in common, so we can actually work with them. Okay? So truly, in this whole part, right, what we're doing is we are actually just doing the first step of working with division of fractions. And so the number one step to remember is that you have to find a common denominator before you can do anything else. Okay, so now let's try this one. We have 8 and 9, so I'm going to list 8 right here. I'm going to list 9 right here. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times 7 is 56. 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times 9 is 72. So I have those listed out. Okay, and now let's do 9. 9 times 1 is 9. 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times 3 is 27. 9 times 4 is 36. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 6 is 54. 9 times 7 is 63. 9 times 8 is 72. And 9 times 9 is 81. All right, so I had to go pretty far to find this one. And so you will notice the only one they have in common is 72. So 72 is going to be the common denominator. So again, I have to put equals and a fraction bar, equals and a fraction bar, so we can make an equivalent fraction. And our denominator is 72. So now I ask myself, how did I get from 8 to 72 times 9? What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 3 times 9 is 27. How did I get from 9 to 72 times 8? What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 3 times 8 is 24. And now, as you can see, I have two fractions that are equivalent to their previous fraction, and they have a common denominator. So 3/9 is the same as 24/72. Excuse me, 3/9 is the same as 24/72, and 3/8 is equivalent to 27/72. And then, now that we have a common denominator, we could do something with these two fractions. Okay? Last set that we're working on, we have to figure out 7 and 2. Okay? So let's take a look at 7 and 2, and we're going to list them over here. So I have 2 because that's the denominator of this one, and I have 7 because that's the denominator of that one. So 7 times 1 is 7, 7 times 2 is 14, 7 times 3 is 21, 7 times 4 is 28, 7 times 5 is 35, 7 times 6 is 42, 7 times 7 is 49. Let's stop there and see. So 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8, 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 6 is 12, 2 times 7 is 14. And we're going to stop there because look what I found. I found 14 up here, and I found 14 down here. So now I've discovered that the common denominator would be 14. So I put equals a fraction bar, equals a fraction bar. Denominator is 14. How did I get from 7 to 14 times 2? What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 2 times 2 is 4. How did I get from 2 to 14 times 7? What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 1 times 7 is 7. And now, just like all of them so far, we have created an equivalent fraction to the previous fractions, and now they have a common denominator, so we can do something with them. Okay? All right, so first step in dividing fractions, because again, this one right here says dividing with common denominators. So that means that we are going to divide these pairs of numbers. But the first thing that you have to do is always, to remind you, you have to find a common denominator. Okay, so we did that. That was awesome. Okay, so now the next step is let's actually try it. Let's actually see what we can do. And it says steps for dividing with a common denominator. So you'll notice that now, instead of just finding a common denominator, now they're actually having us divide. So the steps that we just finished, we're going to actually do with this side. So my denominators are 7 and 3. Okay, so we're going to take 7 times 1 is 7, 7 times 2 is 14, 7 times 3 is 21, 7 times 4 is 28, 7 times 5 is 35, 7 times 6 is 42, 7 times 7 is 49. Okay, now let's do 3s. 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15, 3 times 6 is 18, 3 times 7 is 21. There you go. We found the common denominator, and the common denominator that these two numbers share is 21. So that's going to be our common denominator. Now, for room's sake, and because of that, I'm very sorry, I'm going to rewrite our problem over here so we can focus on it. So this is 3/7 divided by 2/3. So what we have to do is we found the common denominator, so I'm going to write it a new way just so that you can follow me. I'm going to put the fraction bar down here, knowing the common denominator is 21. So now we ask ourselves, how did you get from 7 to 21? We times by 3. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 3 times 3 is 9. So that is going to be the equivalent fraction of this one. How did you get from 3 to 21? We times by 7. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 2 times 7 is 14. All right, so now we have these equivalent fractions with the common denominator, and our job is to divide. So the last step, according to this right here, says that all you have to do is divide straight across. So we have 9 21st divided by 14 21st, and it says in the directions, divide straight across. So that means I'm going to divide 9 divided by 14, and when I get 9 divided by 14, write it exactly how you're saying it. 9 divided by 14, okay, and then 21 divided by 21, well, 21 divided by 21 is 1. Everybody see that? Then take it one last step, 9/14 divided by 1 is equal to 9/14. And so now, boys and girls, you have just shown that you can divide straight across, okay? So let's go over the steps again. First step, find a common denominator. We did that. Then we made them equivalent fractions. Then the second step is divide straight across. Okay, so that's pretty simple. Let's try a couple by yourself and see if you're there. All right, so we have 5/9 and we have 2/4. Okay, so I am going to list out 9ths and 4ths. So 9 times 1 is 9, 18, 27. Okay, 9 times 1 is 9, 9 times 2 is 18, 9 times 3 is 27, 9 times 4 is 36. Then I'm going to do 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12, 4 times 4 is 16, 4 times 5 is 20, 4 times 6 is 24, 4 times 7 is 28, 4 times 8 is 32, 4 times 9 is 36. And I finally found the common denominator for those two. The common denominator that we see is 36. So we draw an arrow down, make our new fraction with the denominator being 36, an arrow down, a new fraction with our denominator being 36, and we ask ourselves, how did you get from 9 to 36? Times 4. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 5 times 4 is 20. How did you get from 4 to 36? Times 9. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. 2 times 9 is 18. And now, remembering the second step says divide straight across. So I literally divide straight across. 36 divided by 36 is 1. 20 divided by 18 is 20/18. Now I can say 20/18 divided by 1 is 20/18. And if you remember, I can simplify this because those are both even numbers. So 2 goes into 20 10 times, and 2 goes into 18 9 times, and now I have found the answer. Okay? I hope this feels comfortable for you. I hope you guys are remembering this. I hope this is helpful as a good little reminder of what to do. And what I'm asking you to do for the rest of this lesson is you need to do this problem right here by yourself, and you need to do this problem right here by yourself, and we will be looking for those in class when we check you in the morning. Okay? So, very quickly going back to our goal for the lesson. Today we are going to review dividing with common denominators, and that's exactly what we just did. Question, why can we divide straight across when we have a common denominator? Well, the reason why we can divide straight across when we have a common denominator is because you've made the fractional pieces the same size. Up here, this had sevenths, and up here, this had thirds. We don't know what those look like, but if we make them the same size, we know that 3/7 is the same as 9/21, and we know that 2/3 is the same as 14/21. Now the fractions are the same size, so we can divide straight across because they're the same size. Okay? All right, kiddos, that's all I have for you in this lesson. I hope it was a good review, and I'll see you all later. Bye!